Hi, everyone. Welcome to DomainSherpa. Today, we've got a fantastic episode of Off the Market Forever with my co-hosts James Iles, Chris Zuiker, and Matthew Zuiker, where we focus on the domain space through the lens of end-user acquisitions and upgrades. And on today's show, we bring on a special guest, Andrew Gazdecki of MicroAquire, to talk about his journey and what led to their upgrade and acquisition of acquire.com. And with that kind of domain, it simply does not get better than that. And Andrew provides some really great insight into what led to their decision to acquire the domain, how they obtained it, and how much they paid for it. And remember, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can also watch the video version at domainsherpa.com and on our YouTube channel at ds.tv. We now have all the past episodes there, so you can dig into the largest library of domain-related podcast content in the world for free. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify and other podcast platforms as well. And as usual, big shout out to Dan.com, the #1 place in the world to buy and sell your domains, with a special platform made for domain investors. With all that, it's time to get into this episode of Off the Market Forever here on DomainSherpa, where all roads lead to domains. So let's go. What's up, Sherpa Network? Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Jonathan Tenenbaum, a.k.a. JT, a.k.a. Jayon, a.k.a. Sherpa Winfrey, a.k.a. Mr. So Fresh and So Clean. And I'm the host and producer of DomainSherpa, where all roads lead to domains. Today's show is an Off the Market Forever, which, as you know, features James Iles, Chris Zuiker, and it also features Matthew Zuiker, which we're going to get into, where we focus on the domain space through the lens of end user upgrades and acquisitions. This way you get the perspective of some of the best domain brokers in the world, some of the best journalists in the space who have unique insight and knowledge into the industry and domains, and as it relates to end users. Also, one thing we try to do is bring on special guests, and we've got a really great special guest today, Andrew Gazdecki of MicroAquire. But more on that. I'm not going to do his full intro yet. Special guests get introduced last on this show. That's how we do it. So with that, let me go ahead really quick and do the quick intros. We'll go around the horn. I'm going to start right below me. We got my boy James Iles, a.k.a. James Names, a.k.a. James Iles of Man, a.k.a. House of James, a.k.a. I Will Walk 1,000 Aisles, domain name industry writer, consultant, publisher of James Names, the domain-centric blog. Before James Names, lead writer for the Name Pros blog. And you guys have heard me do the intro, but you can also find him writing on DN Academy, Domain Name Wire, dotcom, as well as Mashable, Business Insider, Vice. Great all around guy and personal friend. Happy to have him on the show. What's happening, James? How are you?
Yeah, all good. You forgot to mention best hair in the domain industry, according to Leanne on Twitter last month. Yeah.
Hey, if they say it on Twitter, then you know it's true. So yes, let's amplify that. Yeah. Best hair in the space, especially because when you compare yourself to me, you know what I'm saying? So yeah. All good. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, my dude. Looking forward to this one. All right, keeping it moving down all the way at the bottom. We got a full house today. I got my boy Chris Zuiker, aka Zuiker's Island, aka World War Z, aka the Brand Whisperer, head of sales and senior domain broker for MediaOptions, #1 domain broker in the world. Y'all know what Chris's deal is. If you don't know by now, he just recently put out his book. If you haven't gotten a copy of it, Chris, how do they find it? How do they get it?
Right now, it's on two places: Amazon and domainnamebrokers.com. I'm sorry, domainnamesecrets.com. Go over there. It'll take you to over a landing page on chriszuiker.com. It's all over my social. Go to my Twitter. You can see, like, I don't know, I've done like 600 tweets in 2 days. So like,
just pick one. Just pick one and click a link.
Just learning how to use Twitter, and I think I hit the wrong button. You know, post all now. Are you sure? Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of tweets on there, baby.
Hey, let's go, man.
You can't miss it if you're following me.
Hey, let's go. But yeah, so and I'll have the links on. You can go to the blog post on domainsherpa.com and you can get all the links and everything. But yeah, if you haven't found Chris by now, definitely get after it. He's not hard to find, just like the rest of us. All right, man. Well, welcome to the show. As always, happy to have you here. And all right, keeping it moving around the horn, we have, for the first time ever on this show, so we actually have two special guests, I guess you could say. But we've got the one and only Matthew Zuiker, a.k.a. The Kid, a.k.a. Zyke1, a.k.a. Matt Locke. So for those of you who don't know, Matthew started his domain journey working with Chris, with his blog, podcast, has come on board with MediaOptions as a junior broker. Has been in the domain space for a few years now and has been well under the hood, talking to some very, very like important, tastemakers on both the sell side, the buy side, big brands, big execs, big domain sellers, big portfolio owners, and really like baptism by fire here. And he was on the panel with us at NamesCon, talking about domains and media options and buying and selling domains and all that good stuff. And so we said, you got to come on the show, man. It's time. Let's go. So welcome to the show, man. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be on here the first time. Excited to see how this goes. It's always different being on it versus watching it. So, this is going to be a fun ride.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, last but certainly, and I don't mean to take away the thunder for you, this being your first show, but we have a special guest. We've got the one and only Andrew Gazdecki of MicroAquire, aka the Gazmanian Devil, aka Micro Machine, aka Gazdecki Matsui, aka Acquire Boy. Think about it. You know what I'm saying? Get it? You know what I mean?
I love him. I love them all.
Yeah, man. So he's for those of you who don't know, he's an entrepreneur, mentor, and founder of MicroAquire, the world's #1 startup acquisition marketplace, which can now be found at acquire.com, which is really one of the things that we're super excited about talking about today. And really, if you want to learn more about his business and what MicroAquire does, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but we're going to focus a lot on the domain. But Andrew recently did a podcast with Andrew Alleman, another Andrew in the space, along with Andrew Rosner, Andrew Miller. There's a lot of Andrews, man. You guys we're going to have to stack rank the Andrews at some point. But he did a really cool podcast with Andrew Alleman at Domain Name Wire. So definitely check that out, because you're going to get a lot more insight even into the business that we might not even cover today. But he's been featured in New York Times, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Inc.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, Mashable, TechCrunch, VentureBeat. Previously the founder of Business Apps and Altcoin.io, both since acquired. In fact, and I love this story, so I want to just tell it really quick. In 2017, he sold his company to a private equity firm. Long, complex, expensive process took him away from what he loved most, which was running his business. And successful entrepreneurship is also recognizing your limits and selling while the getting is good, or while the selling is good, right? A lot of times an entrepreneur will sell once they've reached the end of their journey or taken it as far as they could. He'd done that in that case. If he'd waited, may never have found the buyer at all, leaving him stuck at that entrepreneurial dead end. But being fortunate enough to run a multi-million-dollar business with clout to attract the right conversations, it was an easier process for him than for some. But recognizing that there's really a gap in the marketplace for startups to be able to sell, and for folks to actually acquire startups as well. And as a 2-time founder seller himself, recognizing this gap in the market, decided to help other founders with that journey. And the result was MicroAquire. Founded in 2020, they've already assisted over $500 million in startup acquisitions. That's over $500 million, y'all, if you're paying attention, if you like numbers. And recently acquired acquire.com. And which is right up our alley. I mean, this is what we love to talk about here. And as we say on this show, all roads lead to domains. So, Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, man? That was the most epic introduction I've ever heard. I hope someone gives you a medal for that. That was fantastic. Thanks for having me.
No doubt, man. Yeah, hey, look, it's the one thing I can bring, you know what I mean? I'm just going to bring that energy, and I'm going to give people that lead in that they, it's all good. I'm also available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, you know what I'm saying? You need me to, you're showing up at Thanksgiving dinner. I'll be like, and now bringing the Brussels sprouts.
I love it.
But yeah, man. So, like I said, we, definitely want to get into the domain piece of all this, since, that's really, our thing, and, which we, love, by the way. And as I said, I listened to the podcast that you did with Alleman, which I thought was great. But just to kind of give just a couple minutes of that, and then we can talk more on the more domain stuff. But yeah, I mean, so, when you started up so how quickly did you guys go from kind of kicking it off to getting your first deal to, really starting to build that momentum that led to a lot of the numbers that you guys have already hit?
Crazy enough, I didn't think it was going to work. I thought it was like, who's going to sell a startup on a marketplace to other startup founders? I always joke because it's a startup that helps startups find startup buyers. But I'd say probably the first deal was done after 3 months. And when I first launched it, I was doing all customer support, product, marketing, everything, not sleeping very much, just because the business was so fun to run. But with the marketplace, the flywheel, it takes a little bit to get going, but once it starts, it cannot be stopped. So now it's kind of going, but to get that flame going, it was just a lot of everything and everything more.
Yeah, no doubt.
I even remember the first deal going through. I remember it and having that kind of moment of like, I could just got an email and I was on vacation. I was like, oh shit, like this actually has some legs. Cool. And it's just evolved from there. And we launched in January 2020.
Okay.
Which is unbelievable, really. I mean, you've come so far in such a short amount of time. In terms of customer acquisition, is it kind of is it referrals now? Because I see all the time on LinkedIn. I see the posts from you all the time on LinkedIn. So what does the customer acquisition look like now?
Yeah, I'd say, the playbooks that a lot of companies use in terms of how to build companies has just changed. Like, as a good example, personally, when I launched business apps, I've always been a big believer in brand and storytelling, and earned media, not paid media. And so we had a big emphasis on, getting featured in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or, TechCrunch or VentureBeat. I even wrote for TechCrunch and VentureBeat, and Next Web, and Forbes and stuff like that. And now what I see is, I think one of the most powerful, go-to-markets is social, because that's where everybody is. It's kind of like a conference every single day where you can expose your brands. So most of our focus is we like to say internally, we think like a media company. So we also have a sister blog that, or a sister publication, I should say, where we feature bootstrap startup founders that are getting pressed for the first time. We have a ton of content on MicroAquire for everything you could possibly want to know about acquisitions, which is great for customer acquisition. I think just great for the startup ecosystem, just because, fun fact, when I sold business apps, I got like maybe 10 or 20 friends reaching out with startups being like, how'd you find the buyer? What's due diligence? What's the legal process? And that was kind of like my light bulb moment of like, oh shit. So there's books on marketing, there's books on sales, there's a million books on how to raise capital, but there's nothing on the most important part of the founder's journey, which is the exit, arguably.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, someone's got to, help here. And so that was my intention behind MicroAquire when I first launched it. But I'll never forget the first paying customer as well was Ryan Holmes from HooteSuite, which I thought was pretty cool because I'm also kind of a startup nerd. So I thought I saw that come in. I was like, I'm a fan of HooteSuite. I used to use the product. So brilliant. Shout out to him. And definitely remember that first deal like it was yesterday. Yeah,
that's awesome. And, sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, and when you said that he was a paid customer, so in terms of making money on MicroAquire, it's the buyers that are paying to use the service. So for a seller, it's free. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So to list on MicroAquire, it's entirely free. There's no commissions. There's no fees. We do have some paid services. Like we have a service called Managed by MicroAquire where we'll broker your deal depending on the size of the business. Like if it's going to be a truly life-changing multi-million-dollar acquisition, we'll do it for 3 to 5% or something like that. And then on the buy side, to access deals on MicroAquire, because they're all private. So an analogy, if you're not familiar with MicroAquire, we put trust, security, and privacy at the core of everything that we do. And so when you list your business on MicroAquire, no one's going to be able to, employees aren't going to find out, customers aren't going to find out, investors aren't going to find out. And so as a buyer, if you want to find out more information about the business, it's kind of like a blind profile, if you will. You have to pay to request access. When you pay to request access, that goes to the founder, and then the founder can pick and choose whether or not to give you access by researching your LinkedIn. They can conversate with you. They can have you sign an NDA. We have all that built into MicroAquire. But so we just charge buyers for access to the deals on the platform.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think that, it makes sense too. So then you've got some sort of like with sellers have a little bit of skin in the game, and then also, I'm sorry, with the buyers having a little bit of skin in the game, right? And then so you're eliminating some of the tire kicking, and then it establishes also some legitimacy for the sellers to know that the buyers that they're talking to, they understand like what they're about, who they are. And, I think that creates a little bit of like some positive gatekeeping, if you will, which seems like it would be important in that process. So.
Yeah,
Well,
that's actually just a footnote on that. That's actually how we came up with the model of charging the buyer, not the seller. Is we had a few complaints, or it was just me at the time, but a few sellers complaining they would get like 100 requests from people, and so your job is to filter through like 100 people. And I remember I would help people. I would like put them all on an Excel spreadsheet and be like, this person's legit. This one, I have no idea who this person is. And then I just said like, hey, let's just throw up a paywall. Like if you don't have like, $500, $600, $700, you're probably not serious about like some acquisitions. And so that's been a big filtering tool. And our goal is, quality conversations, not quantity. You don't want like 100 messages when you're selling your businesses because you're just going to drown in them. You want the most focused ones. So that was actually, the reason behind it.
Well, that Andrew, that's interesting because that's exactly, that's domaining to the T, right? It's like, same thing, right? We get a ton of leads coming in, right? Most of them are just fake bots. I mean, I don't know. It amazes me that people even set these things up to the emails they use. It's like, 20 characters long, sprinkled in with numbers, and you're like, there's no way you could even remember that. But going back, it's interesting because I always think about like the framing, right? So I mean, we've done a lot of business where negotiating every day, and that's a great frame for the buyer to have, right? So I mean, the buyer knows who the seller is in this platform. By the way, I signed up yesterday, so
nice, thank you.
Not paying yet, but I was like, man, I'd like to buy that one. Although I gotta stay focused on domains. So I mean, that's it. I mean, truly, like you turn the tables to where they have more information, and it seems like the seller is really the seller has more information on the buyer. I think I had that wrong, which is powerful. It's powerful to kind of do that research, helps it to frame it a little better. My question, I mean, we can go down this route, but my question is more. So I always like to come back to branding, right? This is obviously about domain names and how did you walk me through your branding for MicroAquire? Like, did you start with MicroAquire? Did you start with other brands? Why did you go with MicroAquire?
Why micro, not macro?
Well, just why not anything, right? So, I mean, what was like? Walk me through your branding story with MicroAquire. How did that then lead to, just the kind of conversations, this moment where then you made this acquisition for acquire.com?
Yeah, definitely. So, when you first enter a market, if you try to serve everyone, you end up serving no one. And so I wanted the position to be very, very niche and very, very specific. And there's a lot of people building really great micro SaaS, micro e-commerce businesses. And when I say micro, I think of that as like, sub $1 million. But to some people, that's, 5,000, 50,000, 50 million, depending on if you're like a billionaire or something like that. And so that was the original concept was, I wanted to build something for specifically bootstrap startups, because those startups generally are easier to sell. You can sell a business if you're bootstrapping for 3 million and you're a millionaire. Congrats. If you had raised venture capital, you get a job somewhere. Also, huge congrats. And so I just thought that was a really underserved market that hadn't seen any innovation, and really was just ripe for disruption. And so started with micro, and then just as we've grown, we've facilitated, deals over 8 figures, so past 10 million. And it just felt right to drop the micro, and we did a ton of research on this. And so common questions that we get from customers is my business like too small for yours? And, as the brand evolves, we want to be the marketplace where as a startup, you can sell for 10K or 100 million, and that's kind of our goal. And so, with micro in the name, that also can be, viewed as tiny, small, little, what have you. There's a ton of synonyms for micro. So we thought by dropping micro, we'd have basically better positioning to where we want to go. And I always tell my team, like, what got us here isn't going to get us where we want to go. And so we want to serve, both micro and both macro. And we do own macroacquire.com.
Nice.
that started to become like a running joke. Once we started showing, like, people were able to sell businesses for, millions of dollars on the platform, which, candidly surprises me to this day.
Sure.
So we felt, and then also another thing, I had been trying to get acquire.com for about a year and a half. One of my investors, when I told them that we acquired acquire.com, it's a mouthful. He sent me a screenshot of just a conversation we had on Twitter from like July 2021, where I mentioned, I've been looking at this domain, but it's taken and we don't have the capital, but we'll see. And so, yeah, long story short, just I think we've grown to a point where, we really want to establish ourselves as kind of like the default marketplace. And then also I'll add, we've had a lot of competitors pop up. So shout out to Tiny Acquire, Early Acquire, Easy Acquire, Soft Acquire.
Seriously,
like Nano Acquire. Like, I can't even make this up. Like,
yeah, that's crazy. Well, I mean, sorry, not to cut you off. I just want to make the point that I think that you can almost look at that as flattering, right? And it's like, so that they want to, everyone wants to emulate the success and what you guys have done, and then try to piggyback off your own brand, which is super frustrating. So then really at that point, you almost have no choice, but then it's like, you've got to get sort of the big brand, the umbrella that's going to cover it all. Right. I mean, is that?
Yeah. I mean, I like to root for just all of our, competitors. We're all trying to help entrepreneurs succeed. So I don't take any offense to it. And that's also just gonna happen if you build a startup. Like, if you build a startup and you don't get copied, like, you should be more concerned if you are being copied. Like, I always say, if you're not being copied, try harder.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, and then that's where you start to look at things that cannot be copied, like your brand, your customer experience, your distribution strategy. I'd really focus on, brand. That's kind of, in my mind, the differentiator for a lot of companies. Because you can have two companies with the exact same product, but, who's talking about what company more? What is their story? These are things that you just can't copy them. Well, I guess you could, but it just doesn't come off as authentic. And then, with brand, it's David Cancel from Drift gave me some advice one time. He said we kind of went through these like 3 waves of SaaS building, if you will. The first wave was basically like in 2010. The first one to build it kind of won the market. Mm-hmm. And then the second wave, let's call it in like 2014, 2015, was the first company to figure out the best go-to-market model. So LTV to CAC, like how many sales reps, SDRs, whatever. And then now we've entered kind of this third wave, which is brand. It's like the last defensible mode of a business. And I started MicroAquire just, a lot of brand marketing, storytelling, going on podcasts like this, because I believe that's how businesses stand out today. And just to give you another analogy too, I think when startups think of their competitors, they think of maybe those names that I just mentioned. But what you're really competing for is customer retention. Mm-hmm. There's 100 million, billion startups out there. And so I think the more you can focus on brand and figure out a way to position your business in a way that draws an emotional response from people, or just you market it in a way that's humorous or just gets reaction, the more you're going to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess leading off of that, was there a pivotal moment for you when you're like, I've got to buy this, like it's going to happen?
You want to hear the story?
I was just going to ask that. I was just going to ask that.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Yeah. Well, first I want to apologize for, I don't know if any of you saw the tweet where I said we bought it for 2 million. I want to apologize for that. It was an off the cuff tweet. I had no idea it would go that viral. Someone had just written on Twitter, like, what did Gazdecki pay for acquire.com? And someone said, like, definitely over $1 million. And then someone said, like, I think between 5 and 10 million. I was like, oh, we bought it for 2 million.
Yeah.
So to clarify, we paid a little over 200,000 for the domain, but I had been trying to get it for about a year and a half, like I had mentioned earlier. And the price.
Wait, real quick before we get into the acquisition process, let's talk a little bit about the drama and all that, because I think the key thing, and it's important, and I think it's important for the audience too to understand, like, you know, because of the way the domain space works, you know, sales, transparency is limited, right? And because of that, and I think you're also in a situation where, you know, as things have slowed down from a sort of macroeconomic standpoint, you know, there's not as much to report. So, you know, and we've got James here who literally writes the blog articles about, you know, the domain sales, like him, a couple other guys, Jamie Zock, a few other, Elliot Silver, some of the folks who wrote about your comment, right? You know, they end up scouring, like, you know, George Kirikos. They literally scour like companies' SEC filings and, you know, anywhere that they can to try to glean, like, when you have a domain that has been acquired, when you can get a price, you know, because it's not completely transparent, and different folks have different, you know, opinions on, you know, whether transparency is a good thing, a bad thing, you know, especially when you're talking about super premium domains. So, you know, it's a bit of you know, because of that, it creates sort of a extra sensitivity around, you know, when there are numbers thrown out there. So I think people were oversensitive, and I feel like it's unfortunate that, you know, it was kind of like people were giving you a hard time for just tweeting, like, as if, you know, like, because when we're tweeting, we're just talking, right? It's like you said, like, it's like being at a conference in a way, having a conversation. It's just the words you say end up getting amplified to who knows what size of audience based on what you say and everything else. So it ends up becoming like a thing. But I think part of it is also just indicative of how the space is, because the space is so like thirsty for information around domain transactions that it's like any bit of information. And, you know, and hearing you say it the way you said it, I think that there was people believe that, you know, there's validity there, right? Like, you know, there's sort of trust and respect already built into you and the persona that you've established, you know, online and out there in the world. So people just kind of latched onto it, ran with it, because it was also sounded newsworthy. You know, it's like, oh, this is a big domain sale. Like, that's exciting. There's not a lot of other news.
Any 7-figure domain sales kind of domain bloggers latch onto pretty quickly. I do it sometimes, but I tend to try and get some more verification on it if I can. You know, by maybe if I'd have seen the tweet, I might have DM'd Andrew privately or something like that, just to say, hey, can you just confirm this for me? But you know, I don't blame people for running with it, because 7 or 8 times out of 10 that is factually correct. But then, you know, that $2 million number then stays out there. So $2 million is always going to be associated with acquire.com.
There you go. So
which is, it's not a bad thing, but you know, just for transparency's sake, it can be quite difficult sometimes when you're trying to report on these things, and you know, you've got various bloggers trying to beat you to the punch.
That's true
sometimes
too,
you just go with it. Yeah,
trying to break.
Yeah. I mean, if someone DM me, I clarified that this was a joke hours after I tweeted it.
Yeah.
And I think if you just go through my Twitter feed, it should have been kind of obvious. Like, maybe reach out to me, maybe talk to me.
Yeah.
Maybe confirm the sale, maybe ask for an official sales price, because I'd give it to you. Because when we were, you know, getting feedback on our new logo design, I don't know if you guys have seen that SNL skit of like Papyrus and the Avatar thing. I threw up a logo in Papyrus, and I was like, "Hey, new acquire.com logo. What does everybody think?" And it's in Papyrus, like. And then I was like, "All right, I hear everybody's feedback." And I gave it like a rainbow gradient with like a big shadow background. So I'm not a very serious person. So I think just, but I understand.
Yeah, when you view it in the entirety of a Twitter feed, then it's completely obvious. But some people will just see that and then run with it. There's a whole debate about whether that's a good thing to do or not. But some people do that. I just want to make it clear I didn't write about it.
But James is like, yo,
I mean,
it wasn't me, man.
It reminded me of I don't know if you saw that guy standing outside of Twitter when he got fired, Raul Ligma.
Oh, Raul.
I think when some journalists want something to be true so bad, they'll just write about it without really, just doing journalism 101 and just, fact checking. Just a simple DM would have probably saved a lot of people some headaches. And then I thought it was really interesting how people were mad at me overwriting an article that they didn't clarify, because that's just kind of like gaslighting. It's like, you look dumb because you didn't clarify something as true and you're blaming me. It's like, no, dude, you made yourself look dumb. Don't insult me over it. It's not my fault. I said I was sorry. I clarified that it was a joke. So I thought that was also just kind of funny. Hey, you
I think that's
played yourself, man.
And I think that's some of what you get too in the domain space, where it's it's a small, very niche kind of space. We've all known each other for a long, long time. The people that are in the space kind of know who's who, what's what, and and stuff gets kind of put out there sort of like news when it's not exactly news, but there's not necessarily a lot to report on, right? So that kind of goes back to this whole thing of it's just a slow news day. So it's like, oh, hey, Rick Schwartz, who's this guy, this domain king who's been around forever, but somebody will literally write an article about something. He tweeted something and then it becomes a blog post. And it's just, again, it's just one of those things. But no, hey man, I thought it was funny. I mean, things, that kind of shit happens. It's and
it was also a learning experience for me. I had no idea that was gonna happen. So obviously, if I could go back, I wouldn't have done that. I just, jokingly, I didn't put out a press release. I didn't, throw up a, edited, receipt or anything like that. It was just literally a tweet, just hey, I sold over 2 million. That was it. And then I just went and got lunch and came back and was like, whoa, this is really taking off.
Welcome to domaining Twitter.
I trolled the domain community.
But by no intent, that was not my intent at all. It was just kind of
of course, yeah.
The first, I didn't even know who I was responding to. I was just responding to just, a person that had asked. And then, but anyways, I just wanted to clarify, apologize. And I do recognize, if you're going to announce something like that, if I ever do buy another big domain, I'll be sure not to do that. So you have my word on that. So sorry to anybody that, I offended by that.
MediaOptions is the industry's leading domain broker specializing in domain acquisitions, high-value domain sales, and domain name consultation. As pioneers and thought leaders on the subject of the domain aftermarket and domain name value, plus through their clear domain acquisition service, MediaOptions offers startups and established corporations an unparalleled scope of high-value domain options, providing access to domain names and curation technologies not available elsewhere. MediaOptions believes in the power of a great domain name and is dedicated to helping you obtain yours. Call or email today to put a domain to work for you.
So let's talk about the process then. Let's talk about how you actually did acquire it. So you said just over 200K. You'd been eyeing it for a minute. So what was so how did you finally end up with it?
Yeah, so I was actually in Hawaii on vacation, totally trying to unplug and everything. And then guess what? Just the owner of the domain kind of pops out of nowhere, and I was working through GoDaddy's brokerage service, and I'd originally reached out to the owner directly, and so they had noticed I was the founder of MicroAquire, and so they were saying they were looking for 500K. They had offers higher than that in the past, what have you. And so I tried again earlier this year with GoDaddy's domain brokerage service, and the rep emailed me while I was on vacation and said, hey, we just got an email saying that this individual is interested in selling the domain, and the last price that we kind of got close around was like $375. And I walked from that, and then I just said, hey, listen, we're probably going to go into like a global recession, 200K is the best I can do. And we can wire same day. And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah.
It happened like real, just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, no, there's
So-
a lot of interesting pieces that are go ahead.
Well, no, my question was more like when, so I mean, you obviously launched with MicroAquire. I'm always interested in.
Oh, yeah, you're going to get it. Wait, Chris, before
behind-
before you're going to get into the brand piece, and
Okay.
let's do that in 10 seconds. I just want to make a couple quick points that I think it's interesting that, so this is where I get to kind of hype up what we do a little bit, right? And then, when we talk about whatever broker you're going to end up using, whether it's GoDaddy, MediaOptions, this is I'm not, it sounds like I'm going to be on like my sales pitch thing, but as the number one broker in the space, I mean, you mentioned how MicroAquire has partnered up with escrow.com. I mean, escrow is the number one escrow service for domains. So we are their number one domain client. But I think the point you made about utilizing somebody to help run a little bit of interference, I mean, same kind of thing when you talk about like the sale of the businesses and the startups, like, the confidentiality is critical, being discreet, because there is a negotiation process and a strategy that really makes sense when you're, trying to guard the identity of a buyer or a seller, because, people are they're going to frame the price of the domain or whatever it might be based on what they think the size of the pockets of their buyer might be, right? So, and then obviously on the sell side, you deal with some of that same kind of stuff. And so I think that's an interesting point. I mean, we always are, pounding that drum where it's like, no matter who you use, utilizing a broker, is helpful in a lot of ways because, again, there's a discretion piece that can really help when you're trying to acquire. There's also access. So I just had to kind of sort of bang the drum around that because that really resonates,
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, if you're like Mark Cuban or something and you reach out to someone owning a domain, they're going to be like, this is 5 million now. So, and then obviously just seeing kind of like the use case we would have for it, we were priced higher. And so when I reached out directly, the quoted price was over 500,000. When I had a broker reach out, the quoted price was we almost landed on like 3. They basically were hard and firm at 375,000, and then so that cut it down a little bit. And then the domain broker, I think, probably reached out and relayed my message. Or actually he did, and just said, my client just said like he has fears of like a global recession coming up. He's going to use this for, some new venture. I don't have too many details on it. Do you want to take this? He said basically he's ready to go, but he's going to go with, a different domain if you're not interested or something like that. And so I think creating that urgency and then just not knowing it was me, saved me a few 100,000. So even though you're working with a broker, I actually save quite a bit of money. So
I think
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
MediaOptions are going to clip that one up, aren't they?
What's that?
MediaOptions will clip that one up.
That'll be, well, absolutely. That's going to be a soundbite we're going to push all over the place.
Put me on an ad. Put me on an ad.
But yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And you guys paid all at once, like, so you didn't need the payment plan or anything like that. And, which I think is probably helpful to get a deal over the hump. But, with those big names, I mean, we had Charlie Bullock from scan.com on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about how, and they had a very similar situation where their old domain was, so they were dealing with like MRI scans and things like that. And they have a new platform for basically scheduling and being able to make, the appointments and everything else for MRIs. But originally they were like, it was some local MRI scan.com.
It was nationalmriscan.com.
Yeah. So it was like, and then they went from there to scan.com, similar to MicroAquire. You realize as the scope of your business expands, and like you said, what got you to the level of success that you're at now is not necessarily what's going to get you to the next level of success. And, when you look at these brands that are intended to be global, and Chris and Matthew will talk a ton about, global positioning and how, really owning that one word premium.com is like kind of the key thing when you're talking about establishing, because you might have multiple people that have the word acquire as what they're trying to, base their business on. But if without acquire.com, I mean, every email that's getting sent accidentally to acquire.com because they're, confusing their own customers by not owning the big umbrella that covers their entire brand and owning their brand creates all sorts of different risk and other stuff. So Chris, with that, let me segue to you, because now we can talk more about that aspect. I just wanted to kind of hone in a little bit on the actual acquisition process, but on you, man.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, what was there a pivotal moment when you're like, okay, I want to take this down? Like, I want to, like, was it talking to your investors? Was it talking to your, was it when you hit a certain growth target? Like, what was that catalyst for you that said, okay, now's the time to go from MicroAquire to Acquire?
Yeah, it's always been in kind of my, vision plan, or I guess wish list, if you will, because getting this domain wasn't, guaranteed. But I mean, when you really think about it, startup founders don't want a micro acquisition. I don't. I want to maximize my acquisition. And I think just having the micro, it resonates with a lot of people in terms of, who it's for, which is smaller businesses. But again, as we evolve, we want to, really position ourselves as the marketplace where you sell your business for the maximum price, not a micro price. And so after countless customer interviews and just talking with my team, I did a full vote with my team. We did a vote on Twitter, like, should we drop the micro? My team voted 90% yes, because every other call is like, what's the biggest deal size you've done? Because we're working with a lot of, pretty large startups now. When I say large, I like, let's call it 20 million and under in enterprise value. And it just made sense to drop that so we can be more inclusive in terms of the startups that we want to acquire. And our goal is to build, again, the default marketplace to buy and sell these online businesses. And so having that word micro, it's kind of like you can replace micro with BlogAquire or EasyAquire or whatever, like,
Yeah. No, like all the ones you said before, all the ones that your ankle biting competition is now have created as an effort to try to steal some of your market share,
Yeah. And so it allows us to, really, kind of position ourselves as, a company that can facilitate multi-million-dollar acquisitions and not micro. And, we even joke about macro. It's like, which one is it? It's both. It's micro acquisitions and macro acquisitions. So, the pivotal moment, like, before we actually 100% like agreed to terms to get the domain, I ran a poll with my team, and I just said, and it was an anonymous poll. It just had, should we get it? Yes, no comments. And the comments were overwhelmingly like, yes. I hear on so many like calls, like, oh, I thought we were too big for you guys. And surprisingly, some people thought would say we're too small for you guys, even though it says micro in the name.
They're like, instead we went with micro, mini micro.
Maybe they were confusing us with Microsoft. I don't know. But it just made sense to, drop it. And then I think it also allows us to, reposition our story as, for entrepreneurs. It's like, let's really maximize your acquisition. Let's not have a micro acquisition. Let's have, an acquisition that, is life-changing. And that's really our goal at Acquire is, we want to help entrepreneurs achieve life-changing acquisitions. And that definition is different for so many different people. $50K for someone in Pakistan is entirely life-changing. We've seen that in the United States. It could be a different number. It just depends on where you are in life. And we want to facilitate all of those acquisitions and not just micro acquisitions, if you will.
Oh, awesome. And I think we only have like 10 minutes here, but when you look at your the startups that have sold, what are your, like, how would you rank like the biggest lessons? Obviously there's revenue and profit. So I mean, exactly on your platform.
Yeah, I would say the main things to succeed when selling a business is number one, understand how the acquisition process works. So just read up on, and we have like a course, we have, we're available for calls to help. But just simple things like the legal steps, due diligence. We have tools that help with legal doc creation, due diligence, just understanding how that works. And aside from that, just being honest is a huge thing. Like, surprise, like don't lie about certain numbers because they will be caught. And it just never ends well if you do that. And then also just be realistic on valuation. I think that's probably the one that entrepreneurs shoot themselves in the foot the most, is they overprice their business. And just understanding, and we have reports that we put out because we try to be as transparent as possible with what we're seeing in the market to help entrepreneurs and both buyers. So pricing your startup correctly, and then just having just relevant information that every buyer is going to ask. Like, if I had to give three things, it's just one, be honest. And that includes, presenting your business with, warts and all. Like, I haven't raised pricing. I haven't done a good job at sales and marketing. So buyers going to hear that and think, oh, growth opportunities. There's there's room to run with this business.
Yep.
And then two, being reasonable on valuation. Because if the gap is too big to close, you got to understand that buyers are looking at multiple, if not hundreds of businesses per month, if not thousands, if they're a, institutional private equity firm buyer. And then three, if you can, we have a P&L builder, but if you can have clean financial statements for people to review, and it just shows that you're organized and you are serious about an acquisition, that really separates two different businesses. If you're talking to one that's, kind of like slow to respond, crazy on valuation, no P&L, versus quick to respond, honest, upfront, happy to hop on a phone call, has a clean P&L, those conversations are going to be completely different.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you mentioned the expectations piece, and I think there's a lot of parallels on the domains side as well. That just sounds like so much of what we talk about even in our own internal meetings when we're talking about working with buyers and sellers on domain names, because, it's that understanding, having a reasonable expectation, and also understanding too, as the market shifts, that's going to change, and your opportunities are only there for so long. So it's like, obviously it's a bit different when you're operating a business that you could maybe make some changes to that, will increase or decrease the potential value. But, when you have something that has a certain price tag on it, and, the economy, or like you kind of use that narrative when you acquire, which was accurate, which is, hey, we're coming up on a recession. It's like you've got an opportunity to sell something for a lot of money that could really matter. But then if you're going to sit and wait because you think, no, we're going to do better, we're going to do better, we're going to do better. And, then those opportunities are gone. And now we're dealing with, like, we see it now based on the shift that has happened from a macroeconomic level. We've got clients that are trying to sell domains that are like, hey, is that offer, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, 3 weeks ago, that was, is that still, it's like, that horse has long left the barn. So do you see that impact though, when you talk about like just the economy changing and softening, raising rates and impacting some of the more risky assets? And, do you see valuations coming down? Do you see sellers more actively willing to lower their prices? Do you see the buyers taking some of their interest off the table, if you will?
Yeah, good question. There's a good quote that I think you might like by I think it's Fat Joe. He said something like, today's price is not yesterday's price.
No doubt. Yeah, let's go.
So, prices are always changing, so when you get an offer, it may be the only offer you get for a while. So
yeah.
I always tell founders, if you get a serious offer, consider it, unless it's just completely, out of your expectations. But in terms of valuations, we actually haven't seen much of a decline. And I think the biggest reason for that is in 2000 or not 2000, that's still so long ago, 2020, 20 and 21, the whole venture and startup ecosystem just went nuts with valuations. And so we saw a huge issue with sellers just pricing high because they're like, well, our competitor just raised at like 100 times revenue, so why am I not worth that? And with acquisitions, buyers are paying for current execution, not potential or future execution, if that makes sense. So investors are making a bet that you're going to grow really big. Buyers are just paying for what you've accomplished today, nothing else. Sometimes, obviously they'll factor in, growth opportunities, et cetera. But generally, your business is valued on its worth today, and it's not comparable to, you can't just have a reason for valuation of, oh, my competitor just got acquired for $3 billion, so I must be worth, that's it just doesn't work like that. So surprisingly, no, we haven't seen too much change in terms of valuations. We have seen more buyers listing with realistic asking prices. And so that has led to more acquisitions. And I think just a better, healthier.
Oh, you mean sellers listing with more realistic.
Oh, excuse me. Yes. Sellers. Yeah. They're really starting to listen like, hey, your business isn't worth 50 times revenue. I'm sorry, unless you're Slack and you're growing like crazy. So we haven't seen too much of a shift, but I think, we're still early into, what's going to happen in 2023. And the last report we did was from January to August. So some things may have started to shift, but we haven't seen anything seismic to the point where I can say everything's fallen off a cliff, kind of like the venture world, if you will. And I think I think people are rotating out of public equities into cash flowing online businesses. That's my best guess.
No, I think that's great. And I know we only have like 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll make this kind of quick. So now when you see new opportunities come onto the platform, do you as now having acquired a super premium domain yourself, does the domain play into any role when you look and say, oh, that company's got a pretty sick domain, or does that play into it at all?
I'm all the time. I've seen some really good domains come in where I'm like, that even just that domain right there is worth a couple $100,000. Like, this is a good business. Yeah. I can't say which ones, but some ones that one word clean .com. So when I see those always kind of make me smile because I've always kind of wanted a solid domain as well, if I'm just being honest. Yeah. Because you see it and you're just like, damn, that company is probably legit. And then that's not always true, but we see that pretty frequently.
That's awesome. All right, well, that's a great soundbite. Oh, James, you look like you had something.
We're good.
Yeah.
And last thing I'll say, if you guys need any sort of proof of exactly what I paid or anything, just to kind of clear all this up, shoot me an email. I'll send you whatever you need. Just so we're all.
I think you got an amazing deal, Andrew. Truly,
and it's confirmed. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, you did. You got great deal on the domain. Yeah, great deal on the domain. But it's not a small price to pay. And but you got a fantastic business, man. I got to tell you, we get an opportunity of to review a lot of companies when we're helping them with in their journey. And I love what you guys are doing. I think when you think about the ability to grow and scale that business, I mean, I've seen a lot of other sort of competitors and other companies sort of kind of in and around that thing, because we deal with the the sale of domains, not necessarily the sale of businesses, but other sites that do kind of try to include more of the business of the sites and all that kind of stuff. And I think you guys are sophisticated, some of the hand holding, I think there's real opportunity to grow that, the consultative piece of that as well, as you guys help. And like you said, you'll, take a few points to, do more of the, be more involved in the brokerage process. And no matter what, you've got the badass domain, man. So it's all good. It's all good stuff. So
thanks, man.
All right, cool. Well, look, we appreciate having you here on the show. I know we're out of time. I want to say thank you to my co-hosts, as always, for being here. And yes, to Andrew, to you, thank you so much for giving us your time. And to the audience, like I say in every show, thank you all for tuning in. Without you, there is no us. So one thing, Andrew, you mentioned a sister site where you guys post some stories, and you want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, bootstrappers.com.
Oh, bootstrappers.com.
Nice.
Love
Yeah,
it.
no, I paid $50K for that one, so we can avoid all drama right now.
Is that a joke?
Bootstrappers.com. I love that too. All right, I'll post that on our site as well when we post this show, which will go live in like 2 days. We'll definitely let you know when it's going live so that you can amplify it as well. But this was great, man, and I love it. I mean, it kind of continues to help us sort of amplify our message, which is, for companies and brands, you can't do much better than your exactmatch.com domain. And so love to see that happen in action, and especially with a company like yours. Looking forward to following your journey as you keep doing what you're doing. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the chat.
Yeah, no doubt.
Andrew.
All right. Peace out, everybody. And we'll see you next time here on Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains. Peace out.